Using the power of visualization to consider the challenges a project team may face and how to create the next level PPP, today's guest, Jean-Christophe Barth, took us right back to Roman times where the very first PPPs were delivered. He shared with us his vision of a next level PPP, which goes beyond value for money and considers the impact on the environment, sustainability, the whole community that will be impacted by the infrastructure project. In short, it is about creating value for future generations. He also explains the top 3 reasons why PPP deals often fall apart. Touching on the culture of collaboration, Jean shares with us his own experiences of the power of bringing the whole team together to visualize the PPP contract in a spirit of transparency and honesty, to think through the challenges they may face and will need to overcome to ensure success. Welcome to this episode of Implementing Best Practice in Business. We're here to help you and your organization understand and implement global best practice to help you face the business challenges of today. Join me, Richard Pharro, CEO of APMG International, in talking to leaders and practitioners who have applied these frameworks and practices to boost their productivity. They're here, willing to share their knowledge and experience to help you learn from them so you can do the same to make you more competitive in today's market. My guest today is Jean-Christophe Barth, who is the Executive Director at the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals. Jean-Christophe is a trained banker, lawyer and mediator, and truly a citizen of the world, with a command of 6 languages, a proud French-German heritage, married to a Dominican, living in Switzerland with 2 pre-teens and a dog. His passion is transformation mediation, which he practices on company boards, early-stage companies, and in long-term public-private partnerships, ideally working with a diverse and multi-competence team. I think it's fair to say that Jean-Christophe likes a challenge. So welcome.
Thank you for having me, Richard.
So what is WAPP? What is WAPPP? Is it a trade association? Is it a lobbying group? Or is it a consultancy? How would you describe it to the layperson?
So the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals is a full impact organization that is bringing together all PPP professionals from all walks of life, be they public sector or private sector, consultants or people who simply have a passion and an interest for public-private partnerships.
So how large is it? I mean, there must be hundreds of thousands of people globally that have an interest in PPPs. How large is the organization and how fast are you growing?
We're growing by the week, and we started in 2018. We were, if you want, incubated within the forum of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe in Geneva at Palais des Nations. And people were convening to discuss standard setting for public-private partnerships. And we said that it would be nice for them to be able to connect beyond this forum. And this is why we then created this membership organization. We bring together these different profiles a bit as an industry association. And the objective in the meantime has become to shape what needs to be known as a profession, a public-private partnership professional. This is a complex materia. You have to be able to do structured finance. You need to understand contracts. You need to understand also business diplomacy. And it's a very interesting discipline. And we are making good progress with shaping this profession. We've started to have peer recognitions also amongst professionals, because when you come with the APMG Group CP3P certification scheme and also bring experience, then as a WAPP professional, as a PPP professional, you can become a recognized peer. And this is something unique that doesn't exist outside of WAPP, and so we're quite happy that we're able to uplift the standards of the PPP profession.
That's fascinating, Jean-Christophe. And what are your objectives over the next 2 years? If we were having this conversation in 2025 and you were looking back, what would you have hoped to achieve in that period?
I believe the main objective is how can PPPs stay relevant and deliver impact on the ground. From the time the UK PFI, the Project Finance Initiative, started, and today's PPPs, they look very different. And they're continuously evolving. And so it's important to stay in touch and connect with other professionals from other parts of the world. And if you want, identify and try to shape the ecosystem of PPP, of the PPP profession. The advantage of having an organization like WAPP and being a member of it, we're a member-driven organization, and that means that we strive to remain market-ready and able to identify and facilitate the latest trends. And I believe that's the biggest advantage and also the objective for the next couple of years to really stay relevant and abreast on the latest trends in our industry.
Jean-Christophe, you say clearly PPPs have been around a long time and they have evolved as most practices do evolve. But I'm sure you've seen a few potential PPPs fall apart for a number of reasons. Are there obvious reasons? Are there sort of a top 3 things that may cause a PPP not sort of to be able to be executed? Because clearly there must be a huge amount of discussion and negotiation up front before partners get to signing a contract for a PPP. What usually goes wrong in those early days?
You're absolutely right. A lot can actually go wrong, and I'm happy to speak about the top 3 reasons from my perspective. I believe there's often a lack of project preparation. At times, what we see is that the process is politically driven and not market driven, and that is a risk for public-private partnership. And then I think there's also often poor change management processes in the contract and a lack of communication. I believe also that dispute avoidance is extremely important over long-term complex life cycles in projects. And then I also believe that when a project often fails when demand dissipates, and that is often the case when the equation, the user-paid concession model of a PPP and its objectives and the needs of the users are not completely adjusted or not met, then also the likelihood of it going wrong is quite high. And so it's important to really find a good economic balance, but also involve the beneficiaries of that infrastructure sufficiently, civil society. Because at the end, this is the reason why you want to do a public-private partnership infrastructure project. It's because you want to solve some demand that is not fulfilled at that time. And so you need to build performing infrastructure that really fulfills the expectations of the users.
Jean-Christophe, reading around the subject of PPPs, I've come across the term next level PPP. What does that really mean? And how would I recognize a next level PPP from a current level PPP? What is the fundamental difference?
Maybe I need to go back into the medieval times when PPPs started to come about. I mean, in the south of France, there was Canal de Craponne, one of the very first public-private partnerships where private investors, to fulfill the wish of the king, had to build an aqueduct, a road just for water, like in Roman times. And those were the very first projects that were actually done in that format, affermage and also as a délégation de service public today, like gestion déléguée, as they say in French. And then there's also the Anglo-Saxon model that evolved then under the PFI, or later in the Blair years, the PPPs. What you see there is that the main framing was value for money. You wanted to have good value for the money that you were investing in a PFI, typically as a government paid model, but also if you want it as a user paid model, you have to have this economic equilibrium. And so what we understand with next level PPP is that you not only need to look at value for money, but you need to look beyond. Value for money is good, but it's not enough. 2022, what we need is climate resilient infrastructure. We need things to be more circular. We need to have this dimension of having climate resilient infrastructure delivering value for future generations. So in other words, what I'm saying, it's a mindset thing. It's a posture you have to have. The topic needs to be embraced by the market and the changes that are happening. And we define that as projects that go beyond value for money and deliver value for future generations. That's what we understand as next level PPPs. And this is how in last year's annual Congress that we had, Ziad Alexandre Hayek, our president, framed it as next level PPP. And I think it really captures well this mindset of looking beyond the pure market, value for money approach.
I mean, that's fascinating, because I would imagine that if you take into account the impact on the local society, the impact on climate, the ability to build with renewables and sustainably, right at the outset when those conversations start and the contract is structured, it probably doesn't add a lot more to the cost of the project, but it delivers huge benefits. Or is that a naive view?
I think you're right. It's very much about adopting a perspective, aligning the views, which often is not that easy, between the interests of the public sector to be able to quickly solve, an infrastructure gap, and the private player usually coming in and wanting to deliver something on time and on budget, and so sometimes there are trade-offs there. This is why it's important that both take a aligned perspective about that and develop, if you want, a well-prepared and well-designed approach to that, so that they can actually generate value for the money for the public, the private, and the people as beneficiaries of that. And I believe this is one of the big challenges we face today. I think it's not that easy, but I see hope, because, like, if you look at the latest trends in the industry, a lot of companies, private companies, want to do things with a good positive impact, and they are purpose driven. They even seek B Corp certifications and all kinds of standards on how to build infrastructure in an equitable way. So I believe from that side, and paired with good governance, we're able to really have this much more progressive and future looking perspective on more sustainable and climate resilient infrastructure in PPPs.
You must be delighted by this sea change in the way the partners are working together, because I know that you have a personal passion for creating an atmosphere of transparency, honesty and alignment and trust in organizations. So you must be seeing your concepts now being put into practice. So if you were in at the very first meeting between the promoter and the contractors on a PPP, what top 3 tips would you be giving to people to make sure that they work in that creative and open environment for the benefit of all the stakeholders who are going to be impacted by the the infrastructure, the social infrastructure that's being created.
Indeed, I believe I have gone through so complicated projects myself in infrastructure where I have developed an approach where I believe taking quality time upfront to make sure that there is an atmosphere for casual exchange, getting to know each other better, creating cohesion wherever possible, will eventually win a lot of time later. And that is the more important when you're talking about, trying to figure out a good way forward for the project teams from the public side, from the private side, but also involving the civil society stakeholders. And that requires, in practice, a culture of a very high quality communication. How can you achieve that? One of the techniques I like to recommend is to simply develop a memorandum of understanding and process, which will then enable the different stakeholders to agree how do we want to work together. And it's not like you simply have to follow the guidelines of the bid, the public tender or so. You go beyond. You actually shape the culture of your collaboration, and that gives flexibility. But the big advantage of taking this time up front to then speed up operations afterwards is that then at least you're clear who needs to do what, how do we want to go about changes, how do we want to what are the time horizons also for decision taking, when do we want to meet, do we need to formalize this, how do we want to negotiate, what is the escalation mechanism. It's extremely important to be very clear on what happens if something doesn't happen the way it's intended initially. And also, I think one very important thing is to visualize the complexities of the contractual relationship. Because if you're able to, and I've done that in the past, visualize a 200-page contract on one page, then the big advantage is that in these multi-functional environment and teams, you're able to pinpoint directly, okay, we're talking about this step in the project lifecycle. How do we do the preliminary handover of that and that asset? What is the payment milestone for this and that? And by visualizing these things, you make sure that all the people who have very different backgrounds and maybe even some multicultural backgrounds, at least they can see what they mean on a visualization of this complex contract relationship of a public-private partnership. And I believe these are very important things that will then facilitate the collaboration, make sure that you don't have misunderstandings, and you have clarity on how to go about complexities that may lead to disputes. And you know that disputes can be very expensive, so and take time. And the big problem in a project is you don't want to have a looking backward perspective. You actually want to look in the future to try to resolve and find solutions for the problems. But if you're stuck with I'd say, backward-oriented dispute resolution perspective, then you're only going to suck up resources that you need, the key persons in engineering and planning, and all these key people will not be available to actually dedicate their time to find solutions to make progress with the construction of the project or with the execution of the contract. So I believe those are really specific tools that can help to create this atmosphere of transparency, work on the alignment and trust in organizations that help to have better performing long-term public-private partnerships.
And Jean-Christophe, does that take a long time? I mean, is that a process that can be completed in a few weeks, or is it a few months? How long does it take you to get to that level of genuine trust and open relationship between the parties? And to get them to recognize and work through your visualization, your project prototype at the outset, how are we going to deal with these things when they arise? Is that a long process?
It doesn't need to be a long process. As a mediator, I like to take this quality time up front with the different parties because it helps them to better understand each other and where they're coming from and what their key constraints are. And once both sides understand these things, then they can easily put that on a map, try to prioritize and create options and solutions for these challenges that may otherwise, if they stay unaddressed, become something bigger. A mouse can be inflated and become an elephant, and these are things that can then build up to become a tsunami wave that will be unbearable for the project teams, and they will then try to seek guidance from external resources. But I believe that it's always better if they try to resolve the issues that come up. And I mean, we all have been in the project business long enough to understand that you can design the best intended contract, you will always have surprises. And so it's important to give the teams the empowerment needed to try to manage this by themselves.
No, you're right. The contracts, in fact, it always amuses me, and I know you are a lawyer, but it always amuses me how much time and effort people put into negotiating and arguing over specific wording in a contract. But at the end of the day, when something goes wrong, they very rarely help you overcome the problem. It is
Indeed.
it is a misguided
and that is also
belief.
because of the and I believe that's also because as lawyers we're in a form educated, and one expects us to try to cut out all the emotional noise, if I may say, and to really try to be as objective as possible. But we are humans, and we are humans working in teams together to solve bigger problems that we can only achieve together. And for this to work, we need to simply spend this time together, work on the interfaces, try to visualize these things, and then I would say that the contractual dimension becomes a bit relative because the contract needs to be an enabling tool. But the discipline of designing contracts is evolving constantly, where we now have AI assisted contracts, we have smart contracts. A lot is happening in that space. But why not also use more the tools of contract visualization? Because it actually helps to get people who are not trained as lawyers to understand where we have important milestones that need to be achieved. And by having this multi-competence approach about this, we're able to really make the projects more fluid and make sure that there is no unnecessary conflict just because of legal formalities. So I
Oh,
believe it's really important to have this interest-based approach, and this is nothing else than also applying mediative skills and posture in these long-term projects.
that's fascinating. The way you're bringing together that multicultural, multidisciplinary approach to actually identify and resolve problems before the project starts. That's hugely advanced thinking in my view, because I don't think many people are willing to put in the time and effort up front to do such a detailed and thorough review of the challenges that may lay ahead.
You'll be surprised, but it pays off to really work on these, roles and responsibilities, to really also work with the respective sides and then putting the public and the private actors together, because it's together that they need to deliver something. If they're really really well aligned, they can deliver amazing things. But if you have this, I'd say, conventional or the more traditional view of how to go about public contracts, then you're set to go into two different train stations, and you don't want to have that happen. You want to arrive on the same destination, but that needs a bit of work and fine-tuning to develop a relationship that hopefully then creates sufficient trust to have a culture of mutual understanding, a culture of transparency, honesty, that will then enable the teams to deliver superior value. And I actually made experiences myself with multi-competence teams where I simply said, um, I wrote the sentence in a team charter, for example, saying we want to apply very high quality communication at all time. Now, is that something hard you can, claim? No, you can't. But it creates something psychologically that people are bound because of this psychological um, convention that they have just struck. This agreement will create a bond between the people, and they will strive to have this very high quality communication at all time. Had I not written that into that team charter back then, and the same can be applied, for example, in that memorandum of understanding and process, then we would have missed this opportunity. But if everybody understands why they are there, why they want to do that, because this will not only help their professional career, but maybe also their family or other livelihoods. Maybe there are other drivers for them. For example, because they know that this is a very innovative project, that this is something sustainable, or they want to build in something circular, circularity, regenerative approaches, etc. I mean, there's a million reasons you can actually come up with. But if you take the quality time and put that on paper and make sure that everybody understands why they are doing this, what is their driver, then I believe this leads to superior results. And I have the proof because I've gone through that myself many times, be it with infrastructure projects, with multi-competence teams that need to work on a team where they haven't chosen to work with each other, or even with startups, disruptive ventures that come together because they have a vision and they need to make the project work and deliver results, because otherwise the investors will not invest in their early stage venture. And so these MOOPs, these memorandums of understanding and process, are a really very useful tool to create this bond, this emotional contract, the psychological contract between the different parties.
That's fascinating. Jean-Christophe, with your approach to sort of a mediation and engagement with the team up front to visualize what's going to happen and to get that consensus and agreement about how the team will deal with some of the contractual issues, is it fair to say that you would consider a PPP to be a win-win partnership?
I believe if the different stakeholders take the quality time up front and work on a solution-focused, forward-looking culture of collaboration, then they can definitely make everything in favor of making this a PPP with a win-win outcome for the beneficiaries, because the users in the end are the ones who need to really benefit from this infrastructure.
Jean-Christophe, many thanks for your time to sort of share your views with me today. It's a fascinating conversation, and there's so much, I think, for anyone to think about in terms of your upfront approach to build that cohesive team and to use your skills as a lawyer, as a banker, and as a mediator. Fascinating. Thank you very, very much for sharing your thoughts with me.
Thank you very much, Richard. I think it's together with WAPPP and APMG that we're able to improve the PPP industry, and I'm really looking forward to deepening our partnership in the same type of approach, this very high quality partnership.
And we look forward to helping you continue to grow and expand the organisation and bring in even more units and professionals from around the world. There is a lot to be done if we're going to tackle some of the climate change issues and other issues the world faces with infrastructure.
And indeed, this year we have called the annual Congress in June. It's going to be June 13 to 17 It's going to be online, and the topic will be PPPs after COP26, where we want to really look at what are the defining elements that are needed in order to build more climate resilient PPPs that become greener. There's very little out there, and I think we're at the forefront of what this PPP industry is developing. So I'm really looking forward to engage with all the PPP community in that PPP week in June.
Thank you very much, Jean-Christophe. It was fascinating. Thank you for listening. We're always keen to hear your feedback and suggestions for future episodes. You can find all the information in the show notes below. Please visit apmg-international.com to find out more about our accredited training and the certifications that support them that are related to the topics discussed in this series. I hope you've enjoyed today, and I look forward to you joining future episodes while we continue our exploration into best practice and the benefits it brings to global business. Thank you.